The other very important thing about this bike is the steel frame construction. Steel sort of fallen out of favour for most brands over the years. I think mainly because it's heavy, or old steel bikes used to be very heavy. First, modern steel tubing is a lot more advanced than it used to be and gives you nice, lightweight, strong butted tubes. This is still going to be heavier than your average aluminium or carbon bike, but I don't think that's important unless you're a cross-country racer or you're doing any kind of timed uphill event. There's a couple of massive benefits of the steel, the main one being the ride quality. Steel's by far my favourite material now out of aluminium, carbon or steel. Just the ride quality, really good vibration damping, really nice grip, really nice flex characteristics. This bike's actually really stiff. If you grab the saddle and rear wheel, it's a lot stiffer than probably most aluminium or carbon bikes on the market. But the way the frame does twist and flex on the trail really helps with the grip. Get a really dull ride feel, get minimal vibration and just a lot less feedback going into the rider. I find with a lot of aluminium frames, they're really stiff, harsh, and I also find with carbon frames vary a lot from brand to brand, but the main problem I find with carbon is it feels really stiff, but when you really push it into a corner or into a compression or you're hitting hard, rough sections, it'll flex and it'll spring back really harsh and it can be unpredictable. This super predictable. If the back end steps out, it's really calm, really doesn't cause any panic. It starts to drift and you can just deal with it easily. It's also cheap. This frame will cost about €2,400 to build, and that's for a completely custom handmade frame, which would be completely impossible in any other material to get anything similar made for the same price. Steel is also repairable. If you're out on a bike holiday somewhere for a week and you unfortunately crack the frame, which is very unlikely as it's very strong anyway, you could just go and find like a local car garage, a mechanic, and find someone with a welder just to patch it up. If you damage a carbon frame, it's basically over and you have to get a new frame. Aluminium, it is repairable, but you need to get it heat treated after it's been welded because the heat from the welding process softens the alloy. So then you need to find someone with a massive kiln to put the frame in to heat treat it, which is another difficulty. So overall, steel is now my favourite material. The only downside I can find is a bit of added weight. But as I said, I don't think that's important. It's way more important your fitness level, what you've eaten, not being hungover, or how efficient your tyres are if you're worried about speed and efficiency to the top of the hill. Most people nowadays, when you go on a group ride, if one person's faster than another, everyone's stopping at the top anyway to faff around, change settings, take a post for Instagram, text their mom, or do something stupid. So I think a few seconds slower climbing from the weight just doesn't matter at all. So basically this bike sort of becoming redundant. I was riding the titanium bike more for trail riding, and I'd also built the Sun Radical replica, which I was riding more for bike park stuff. And it was basically just sitting there not doing much. I thought, well, we need to do something with it. I'd already got the gearbox mount and the gearbox in stock. So I thought, a few months ago, I'll take it back to Edgery. I'm going to get him to strip the frame down, inspect it all for any problems, which he did. There was no problems with it. And then he rebuilt it with all new bearings, 2 new bearings. It's a single pivot. And actually the original bearings that had been in for 3 years were basically like new anyway. They hadn't had any sort of wear really. It was quite surprising. But new bearings, all new hardware, repainted it in this really nice aluminium oxide finish, which sort of looks like an anodized aluminium frame. Should be really hard wearing and just sort of nice satin finish. New hardware, and then he also welded on the pinion mount and put this pinion gearbox on it. New idler wheel, and rebuilt it with some new parts. The other great advantage to mention of the pinion, you've got no derailleur to worry about. You can't damage it, and it further improves the really good suspension action. You take a lot of weight off the rear wheel. This means the rear wheel's a lot lighter, which means it can respond more quickly and easily over bumps and keep the wheel tracking the ground. I put some new old wheels on it. These are some DT Swiss FR511 rims on 350 hubs, which are great hubs. I think the DT 350 hub is sort of the gold standard, really, of just good. What's the word to describe it? Just good solid hubs that'll just last. They're efficient, they're smooth, do the job. Nothing fancy, but they just get the job done, no problems. The Hope Tech 4 brakes. This is actually the original set of Tech 4s that I had to test. These are 3 years old now. They're still working absolutely perfect. I've given them a bleed, pushed all the pistons out, cleaned the pistons, and they're working like new. Fresh pads, fresh oil, no problems. The old Boxer was very tired and destroyed. All the bushings were gone. All the paint had come off the stanchions. So I bought a new Boxer Select chassis, which looks boring and low spec, but it's what's inside that matters. Inside, you've got the race-only coil spring conversion and NSR custom Charger 2 damper. The fork is also rebuilt by Matthias, who was one of NSR Nigel's apprentices. So it's had all the bushings done, aligned, and all the extra little tweaks and changes that those guys do to make it an amazing fork. This is one of the best forks I've ever had. Nigel spent years working with Stevie Smith, Nathan Rennie, Canyon Factory Racing, and he is really the go-to guy for RockShox suspension and race tuning. This damper itself was actually used by a certain rider and won some World Cup events, which I can't mention. It's absolutely amazing. It's a completely different feel to the standard Charger. And the whole fork overall, it's really hard to describe how good it is. It's exceptionally supple, really soft, really smooth. But the support's just incredible. Probably the easiest and most predictable fork I've ever used. One of the reasons for this is the coil spring instead of the air spring. So with our testing, we found always using 2 O-rings on the stanchions. With the air spring, the fork would always compress 2 mil more on the damper side than the air spring side. This is because the air spring builds up a lot of pressure as the fork's trying to compress, and it goes up from maybe 100 psi in the fork up to like 400 or 500 psi under compression. That means that the fork starts to move up and down like this in a concertina motion, which creates a lot of friction when it's moving up and down. Putting the coil spring in, the coil spring doesn't create any more pressure in the fork and allows the fork to move up and down in a much straighter way. And when we checked that multiple times, it was always 1 millimeter difference between the two. So that's basically half the amount of this jigsaw action as the fork's going up and down. Makes it really smooth and really predictable. And as I said, the damping is just awesome, the way that Nigel's managed to make that work. Rear shock. Previously I had a Nigel tuned rear shock, but that shock was basically destroyed as well and needed a complete new chassis after years of use. We've got this Vorsprung Telem, came in a few months ago, and I wanted to fit it onto my titanium bike, but the eyelets on this shock are pretty big compared to standard shocks because they have spherical bushings inside. Much bigger eyelets, and on the titanium bike it actually hit the frame on both ends, so that was unusable on that bike. But it fitted perfectly on here, and it's got the correct spring rate on for the new owner. So unfortunately I haven't been able to test this shock, but it's basically guaranteed to be an exceptional shock. Vorsprung in Canada, probably repaired, tuned, warranted, modified more shocks than maybe nearly anybody else in the world, except a few of the big tuners. And then they've taken all that knowledge and put that knowledge into completely creating this shock from scratch. And I haven't rode it, but it has to be amazing. I'm planning to get another one for a new custom bike in the future to try. So basically, brand new bike, essentially. Brand new gearbox, got new ODI grips, push-on grips. I don't like lock-ons because they just, again, put too much vibration into your hands. So more comfy, glued and wired on. Motocross riders don't use lock-ons. I don't see why mountain bikers do. Stooge moto bar, 30mm spank stem, new bearings in the works, components headset. It's actually a reach adjust, so you've got 6mm forward or back if you want to play around with that. And a fresh AstonMTB build bike better, works components, top cap. And to finish off, just an Ergon SM Comp saddle. These are excellent downhill saddles. Ergon put a lot of work into this. It's really smooth, no sharp edges, and the padding actually goes all the way around. You're banging around between your legs when you're riding downhill, or using the saddle to control the bike between your legs. You don't get a lot of sort of friction or chafing on your thighs. So that's it for the bike. It's very hard to explain. I've rode hundreds of bikes, and this is probably, well, this is definitely one of the best ones I've ever rode. It's easy to ride, super smooth, massive amounts of grip, really predictable.